Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John with Murder by the Book, coming to you live from my living room for another virtual event. Tonight, we're so excited to have Tori Eldridge with us to talk about her new book, The Ninja's Blade. And we're really excited to have Boyd Morrison with us. He is going to be chatting with Tori about her new release. We're so excited. It's been a couple of years since we've had Boyd in the store, so it's great to, I think, was it the Ark? You came for the Ark, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I came for the Vault too, maybe.
Yeah. Before I pop off and let them chat, let me get these guys introduced. So if you guys are not familiar with them, Tori Eldridge is the author of the Anthony, Lefty, and McCavity nominated first Lily Wong thriller, The Ninja Daughter, which was named one of the best mystery books of the year by the South Florida Sentinel. Her horror screenplay, The Gift, earned a semi-finalist place for the prestigious Academy Award Nickel Fellowship. She is a Hawaiian, Chinese, Norwegian, modern-day ninja who was born and raised in Hawaii. She holds a 5th degree black belt in Toshin, I'm sorry, can you say that for me?
Toshindo.
There we go. Okay. And has traveled the USA teaching seminars on the ninja arts, weapons, and women's self-protection. Boyd Morrison is the co-author with Cussler of the Oregon Files novels, Piranha, The Emperor's Revenge, Typhoon Fury, and Shadow Tyrants, and the author of 6 other books. He is also an actor and engineer with a doctorate in engineering from Virginia Tech, who has worked on NASA's space station project at Johnson Space Center and developed several patents at Thomson RCA. In 2003, he fulfilled a lifelong dream by becoming a Jeopardy champion, and he lives in Seattle. So I'm going to pop off in just a second to let these guys chat. But before I do, I wanted to mention we've got copies of both books in stock. Tori was also kind enough to send some signed book plates with us, or for us, to go with all of her copies of those. You can order those at murderbooks.com. So I'm going to let you guys chat, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Well, Tori, it's so good to see you. We've known each other a long time, but we haven't seen each other in person for a while, of course. So I'm very glad to be here and talking about your new book, The Ninja's Blade, which I tore through.
Oh, good.
Lots of exciting stuff in that. And I was really interested to see, of course, because of your background, and Lily Wong, the main character, is also Chinese Norwegian, and her grandparents are from Hong Kong. And she also has family in Shanghai. And I was very excited to see this because even though I have no Chinese ancestry, as you probably can tell, my father was born in Shanghai. And
no kidding. Yeah, that's
I've
very
been
cool.
to Hong Kong, but I've never been to Shanghai. And so can you tell me a little about you creating the character of Lily Wong? And it sounds like she has a lot in common with you, but she probably also has some things that are not in common with you. So can you talk about how you created her and why you chose the things from your background and things that aren't from your background?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely did draw a lot from my life. My dad was Norwegian from North Dakota. My mother was Chinese Hawaiian from Maui. They met and married in Tokyo, where my sisters were born. So these three, if we, move Hawaiian to the side a little bit, these three cultures, the Chinese, the Norwegian, and the Japanese, are a very big part of my life. And of course, becoming, so involved in the ninja arts, which is a Japanese martial art. Again, we have those cultures in there. And so that was something that I really wanted to bring to a contemporary mystery thriller. I mean, we don't often get, right, kind of these cultural elements and family dynamics in fast-paced mystery thrillers. But, hey, that's what I wanted to do. It's interesting that you mentioned Shanghai because my adult son is now living in Shanghai. And as luck would have it, he married a Hong Konger.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he didn't start dating her until after I had already started writing The Ninja Daughter. So it was just a fluke that I had Lily's mother be an immigrant from Hong Kong. And then my son goes and falls in love with this lovely woman from Hong Kong. And I'm going to be a grandma in November. And my grandbaby is going to be born in Shanghai.
Wow. But you're not going to, unfortunately, you probably aren't going to be able to visit anytime soon.
I may have to wait till spring,
Yeah.
so we'll have to see there. So anyway, we've got similarities, Lily and I, but we're definitely not the same people, and our parents are not the same, and the family dynamic is a bit different.
Yeah, the family is a big part of the book. And does do, when your family reads it, do they go, was that taken from me? Or is that, do you ever have that? Because they're a big part of the book.
Yeah, you know who's really getting a huge kick out of this are my North Dakota Norwegian cousins. Because Lily's father is kind of based, well, when I say based, I think of him in my mind, my cousin's husband, Vern, who is like a salt of the earth farmer. And I always think of Vern when I write this, and they all know it. And so it's really fun. And of course, there's all these things that have come through my father, through the ears that come through. And some of my cousins have book clubs, and they are just getting a huge kick out of that. And then, of course, on the other side of the family,
Yeah.
they're loving all the Chinese references. And of course, I grew up in Honolulu. I went to Punahou. And my whole graduating class, we graduated with former President Barack Obama. And we're very tight knit. We were tight knit before that, but I think that even brought us closer together.
Yeah.
And so it's really fun to touch base and, have that kind of cultural references. It's just been quite fun.
And speaking of cultural references, you have a lot about food in the book. And so I know you are a very fit person. So I don't think it's possible that you could eat as much as Lily does in the book. But talk about, why you wanted to bring so much of, different types of food into the story.
That's hilarious. Yeah, you know what? Everybody mentions this. There's two things that you come away with guaranteed. One is Lily loves to eat. She's completely obsessed with food. And number two is she obviously burns off those calories because she's
Right.
always in action. But you may also know that she doesn't always get to finish
Yeah.
what she's eating. So she's constantly hungry. So I give her a little, excuse there. I love food. I really do. It's a good thing I am as athletic as I have always been in my life, or I would, be in a lot of trouble. And I also love to cook. But the reason that I spend so much page time really bringing all of this food in there is because if you really want to understand a community, if you want to understand a culture, eat their food. Right. And so it's not just Lily's culture we're talking about. Incidentally, her father, the North Dakota Norwegian, runs a authentic Hong Kong cuisine restaurant. He's an incredible chef, and she lives on the second floor over his restaurant. And so, she every time she comes in and out, she gets to go through the kitchen, dip into the steamer and pull out all the dim sum, which, by the way, I would kill to be able to do. And I get to put in all of my favorite foods and all of my favorite teas, and that's so fun. But also because she's in Los Angeles, which, as you know, is one of the most diverse cities, in the world, with all of these cultures and food and languages and everything. It stands to reason that she would love all of these other foods because she's involved in all of these other cultures. And that's just kind of one of my many ways of, touching in with all the multicultures that are here in LA.
Yeah. And the reason she burns off all those calories is because in LA, she does not own a car.
Yeah.
Why? That seems like it would make it really hard on you as a storyteller to not just be able to have her drive it, hop in her car and drive somewhere. So why did you decide to go that way?
Well, hey, for one, easy isn't fun. What fun is easy? But yeah, you know what? Lily is 25. She's a millennial. Millennials look at life differently than us. They have different priorities. They have different assumptions. This is the day and age of rideshare. They think more in terms of experience than ownership. If you talk to millennials, they're not talking about owning their first house. They're talking about, Airbnb. They're not talking about, which prestige car they're going to ride. They can just, hop into a ride share or pick up this or that and the other thing. So that's kind of her mentality. The other thing is she's a real active person, and she would much rather be sweating and, pushing herself to get somewhere than sitting in rush hour traffic, just sitting on her butt. So she's got a thing about that. And the other thing that's kind of fun is it's a real bone of contention between her and her mother, because her mother is, high powered finance businesswoman from Hong Kong. She has certain assumptions about.
Well, and her mother does not like how she answers the phone.
Yeah, you noticed that too.
A number of times in the book, every time Lily answers the phone and it's her mother, is that how you answer the phone?
Yeah, she's got a whole bunch of ideas about what is and is not acceptable, and it doesn't always jive.
But this is a thriller novel. It's not all about food and family. There's a lot of really brutal. I mean, like I was really worried for Lily when she was getting herself into these situations voluntarily. So when you go about crafting an action scene, what do you have a process, or do you just let it flow, kind of wing it? What do you do?
Well, I'm not a real wing it kind of person in general. Yeah, you're right. It's a very action oriented book. It's very fast paced. It's rather cinematic. And, I like action thrillers. That's what I wanted to write. I just wanted to, blend in all of these things. But the challenge is to keep the pace, right? Not to let any of those things slow down what's happening. So I would say that The Ninja's Blade has even more action than The Ninja Daughter. And a lot of that is right up there in front. And as you say, Lily is very impetuous. She's an impulsive, go-getting kind of gal. And she does tend to jump in and get herself into a lot of very sticky situations that can be kind of hair-raising. But, it's super fun. I mean, I'm going to throw this back at you in a second, because you and we both love action things. Our action is quite different in our books. And that's something I want to talk to you about, the difference.
A lot more hand-to-hand combat, of course, because of your martial arts training, whereas mine is lots of explosions and gunfights and chases and stuff like that.
And super cool technology and submarines and, kite flying, Yeah. By the way, I'm listening to the audiobook of Final Option now and totally digging it. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love all that stuff. But as you say, Lily Wong, the action in The Ninja's Blade and The Ninja Daughter, it's very hand-to-hand combat. One of my main goals was to bring authenticity to this series and authenticity to the fighting. Very important to me as a martial arts person, and also as a woman. I really wanted to make sure that this stuff was spot on. So everything that Lily does are techniques that I have either taught, I've done, I've watched my friends do, I've witnessed, or I've researched. So, and that kind of extends too into the other fight scenes as well. There are some weapons involved. So far, nobody has blown anything up, and there have been no submarines, but there have been firearms and blades and and all manner of things like that. So,
the Talon knife is her favorite weapon of choice.
Funny you should mention that. Isn't it fun? I love this knife. It's very cool. But yeah, as to how I'm a real visual person. You and I are both actors, so let me ask you this, because I can answer this, but I'd love to hear your answer. Your acting experience, do you find that seeping into the way in which you write? Absolutely.
How? One of the ways when I'm writing my characters, I think about, is that somebody I would really be interested in playing? is there something to that character that if they were casting this as a movie with any part in the novel, would it be something that I would go, yeah, I would love to sink my teeth into that part? Because if I can't, if it's just a boring part, then I'd be like, I don't want to play that. And I have seen that when I've been auditioning, and you probably have too.
Oh yeah.
When you see auditions and it's just like this awful part that you don't want to spend 2 weeks, or if it's a film or if it's a play, 2 months playing.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly. Yeah. So, I know you do a lot of theater. You've also done television as well.
a little bit. It's mostly theater.
Yeah. So I got my circuitous route to writing started with Broadway musicals, with Anthony Quinn and Michael York and the original First National Company of Cats. Nothing like the movie, And then I came to LA and I was a series regular on The Love Boat, and I did some film and stuff like that. So I started in writing screenplays, and like you, I would think the same thing. As an actor, do I want to play this role? So now, decades later, here I am writing novels. And what I find myself thinking is, I've noticed that I'm rather a method writer. Really? Kind of like a method actor. So I tend to dive into those characters and really feel them. And so what happens when I'm writing is I'm talking to myself. Mm-hmm. And my husband's like, are you talking to me? I'm like, no, I'm writing, leave me alone. So I'm acting out this dialogue and everything. So circling back to your question about action scenes, many times I am also fighting with myself in various places in my house.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, no kidding. So sometimes
choreograph it literally.
Literally.
Wow.
Yeah. I could be thinking of something as I'm walking through the house, and all of a sudden I'll just like jump on the ground and start, doing all this stuff. My husband and son come by. They're like, okay, weird mom is writing another action scene.
In the groin.
Yeah. Every now and again I go into my husband's office. I'm like, can I borrow your neck?
Well, your fight scenes are really great because they're clear, and especially with hand-to-hand combat in books, I find that it can get tedious pretty fast if you don't write them well, because it's, like I think about the movie John Wick, and I think that would be an awful book. Just be John Wick, descriptions of John Wick shooting one guy after another, and it would be so boring. But with your descriptions, the way you set up the scenes and build up the suspense to make it clear what's happening with the action, you do a really good job with that.
Oh, I'm so gratified to hear that. Yeah, when I'm writing this kind of action, right, I really want to tap into the emotion of the point of view character, which in this case is Lily. And it also gives me opportunities to drop in lessons that she's learned from sensei, or little tidbits of ninja secrets that she can, and philosophy and strategy that she can dip in there in the middle of these things. And it's been really fun kind of walking that line of how much detail to put in and how many ninja terminology type things to put in without slowing down the action or, having it, bogged down. So far I've had great responses from, little ladies in South Dakota book club, and also my ninja friends going, can I show you this video? We spent the class, demoing your scene, in chapter 30.
That's great. Well, and I like that she is kind of like Jack Reacher, in that she just goes for the jugular right away. She doesn't mess around. If she's going to take a guy down, she takes him down with prejudice, with prejudice, and make sure that she finishes the fight on top. So I really like that. You never feel like, why is she messing around? She really takes it out as fast as she can.
Yeah, well, that's something else she and I have in common. We're both, little, right? You know, so she's 5'4". I used to be 5'4". I've shrunken over the years. I'm not sure how that happens, but so we're both, you know, a little on the small side, and you can't afford. I mean, if somebody is trying to harm you, God forbid they're trying to kill you, or they're trying to harm somebody you're trying to protect, you can't mess around. Because if you give them a chance to put a shot, you know, a 200-pound guy could just knock her out. So if it comes down to that, yeah, she's going to strike hard, she's going to strike fast, and she's going to put an end to that particular altercation as fast as she can. That said, you know, she's not a vigilante. This isn't a John Wick, you know, Die Hard situation. Generally speaking, the violence that she does is either to protect herself, to protect somebody else, or
Right.
her perception that somebody else needs protection, let's put it that way. So yeah, but she does get in a few squabbles.
Oh yeah. She squabbled it up.
Now, you know, when I'm reading your books, and I also read The Ark, damn good action. Yeah, I love your action adventure, man. It's so much fun. It's like watching a big blockbuster movie, one thing after another, and they're
Yeah.
bigger and bigger, and these huge international things. I mean, I just love it. Now, there's not a whole lot of time for, say, Juan Cabrillo to kind of, you know, reflect a little bit and draw memories from his sensei. So you must have kind of a different objective and process with these.
Yeah. That's specifically something Clive focused on, was just not a lot of, you know, musing and reflection. It's all about moving the story forward to the next thing, and making sure it's just bam, 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 a lot of action, and the characters, especially in Clive's books, tend to be have little doubt about what they're doing. You know, Lily is constantly, you know, playing back things in her head and going, should I have done that? Or, you know, is this the right thing to do? Juan Cabrillo is not like that. He knows exactly what to do all the time. And he's going to do, now he may be deceived, or he may, you know, not be sure of what the villain is doing, but he always has a plan of action.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you know, people do ask me, and I'm sure you get asked this too, you know, is there going to be a movie version of this? And your books are very filmable, because, you know, it's all takes place in LA, and you know, all the like I said, all the action is or most of the action is hand-to-hand combat, some chases through the streets of LA too. Whereas my books would cost $200 million to film, because, you know, like in the Ark, in the first 100 pages, I have a plane crash and a helicopter crash and a, you know, blowing up an oil rig, you know, and that's just in the first part of the book. And so, you know, the first thing when they started filming was probably slashing everything because of the budget. So
it's really true. There was a time, my husband is a television film producer, and for a little while I was doing some adaptations for him, books to film. And yeah, you have to start picking and choosing which enormous set piece thing you're going to do in a film. So if I was to adapt your book, I would have to cut out a few and say, oh yeah, we're going to focus our money on this choice explosion and that choice thing and this choice thing. When I look at the Lily Wong series, I think of a television series, because it's not just Lily, right? It's her incredible family. It's the husband and wife team that run the women's shelter where she gets her clients. One is this salt of the earth Black woman from Compton, and she's married to a former stockbroker, New York Jew, and they've got this wonderful family. And there's, Paco at the, taqueria, and there's, this and that and the other thing. And Uncle, the Shanghaiese, cook, who's, and of course there's Sensei. There's all these characters. And when you watch a television series, you want to hang with the characters you love. And so I'm hopefully that somebody will agree and pick up the series for that. But that's kind of my hope.
Only you knew
with
somebody
it
in Hollywood.
If only I knew.
Yeah, just need that connection.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh.
So yeah, I have no movie news. I don't know if you do.
Not yet, not yet. It's in the hands of some interesting people. That's about as much as I could say about that.
Yeah, but you live in LA, right?
I do. I've been here 35 years. So when I started the Ninja's Blade, it takes place, let's see, 3 weeks after the end of the Ninja Daughter. And at the end of the Ninja Daughter, it ends, of course, with a lot of excitement and a fair lot of violence. and so there it touches a little bit in the Ninja Daughter on sex trafficking. And so I wanted to do a deep dive into the commercial sexual exploitation of youth, specifically here in Los Angeles. And I imagine this is very similar to you because you have a lot of research that has to be done for your books. I'm not sure what you start with, plot or research. I tend to start with research. And so I spent 2 months basically researching this thing. And from here, after all the reports and the articles and the interviews and everything, survivor stories, characters started to appear that collectively told the story of all the ways that these teenagers were lured, tricked, coerced, forced, kidnapped into this horrible situation, and the insidious, conniving ways and different ways that these sex traffickers were able to do that. And of course, I call them sex traffickers instead of pimps because we're talking about underage kids, right? So there's no such thing as a child prostitute. There's only prostituted children because they're too young for the age of consent. And so these are the stories that I wanted to tell, and these are the characters that started to appear to me. And they're from all sorts of different cultural communities in Los Angeles. They have all sorts of different stories. They tug at your heartstrings. Some of them make you laugh. Some of them really piss you off. And then, and then some really, mean characters in there. But so everything started with research. So I wanted to ask you, what comes first, the plot or diving into that research?
Usually the plot. I mean, I usually base it on something I know already, that I've read about, because I'm just a big reader in general. I love technology. I have several engineering degrees, and so I've just been always interested in that kind of stuff. And also, I've traveled a lot, so I always have, ideas for, because in the books that I do, they're globe-trotting stories. I actually set one in Honolulu, my book Rogue Wave.
No kidding.
Honolulu did not come out well in the book because it was about a mega tsunami hitting Hawaii. So, but there I actually went to the Tsunami Warning Center in Ava Beach, which ironically is about 100 yards from the ocean, which is the worst possible planning ever.
One would think, right? But hey, it's Hawaii.
Yeah, so I had the idea for that book, but once I started coming up with the plot, then I actually went to the Tsunami Warning Center and interviewed the people working there and ran the story that I had in mind by them. And they were like, yeah, that could pretty much happen the way you talked about. And so when I'm doing like a book with Clive, I have a general idea, but as I'm going, I go, okay, I want a submarine to sink. How would I sink the submarine? So that's when the real research begins of, what would happen? What's the submarine design like? What kind of submarine is it? So I do, and then the stuff I find out generally affects the plot because sometimes it's different than what I expected. And so that changes because I try to make it, these stories are pretty fantastical, but I try to ground it in as much reality as possible.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about that for your book because it's all set in LA. And I wondered, do you go to all of those locations to research them? And then do you make up your own do you use real locations, or do you make up some to fit the story? Or do you
I do a little of both. I do a little of both. So I've lived here a very long time, and I've lived in a variety of places. And then in addition to that, there was a time when I was going into high schools all over the place with this social entrepreneurship nonprofit project. And so I went into, East LA and South Central and, Oxnard, and I was all over the place. And that was a very cool thing too. So there are a lot of places in this city that I've been to over the years. There are some places that I don't want to go. Like, for instance, the Ninja's Blade. The title works on a variety of levels. One of the levels is, thank you. The blade in this book refers to a stretch of Long Beach Boulevard in Compton. No, I did not go to the Blade at,
run around there at 11 o'clock at night.
No, I didn't do any, person-to-person interviews with, No, I didn't do anything of that. It's wonderful, this wonderful thing called YouTube. Yeah. You can go just about anywhere safely. So I like to say that I do my research, with ninja smarts. I don't put myself in danger unnecessarily, but I do try and have a personal experience with as many places as possible. And I also do like to pull in real places. And then sometimes I will create fictional places. So for instance, in The Ninja Daughter, Lily and Daniel go on this first date at a restaurant called Republique, which actually exists. And it's a wonderful restaurant. And I took them there. And yet she saves a taqueria owner in a place called Paco's Tacos, and that is completely fabricated. So especially if something bad is going to happen someplace, I tend to make that part up. And if it's a politician and I'm going to make them a little shady, I'm making that up. But the role in which they, the office they hold, or the position they hold, or the company they hold, or the type of position, say, in LA Metro, those things exist. And so that requires a lot of research. Right now, you mentioned this is a Los Angeles story, but the third book, I'm halfway through writing the first draft, and I'm taking Lily and Ma to Hong Kong.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So
I had set that up at the end of the book, that she's got this mysterious, well, I don't want to give away anything, but she's got a reason to go to Hong Kong.
There you go. There is a reason. So I always knew, from the moment I started writing this series, and I always knew that I wanted it to be a series, and my feeling was, if it ran long enough, because I think of it as an open-ended series, and if it runs long enough, I knew I wanted her to go to China. So the first place she had to go to was Hong Kong, clearly. So that's where she's going, and I'm very excited about that. But just like I do research on the front end, and then I'll start writing, and then I need something specific, and so I dive in there.
Yeah. Well, I think Google has really changed everything. I with Google, the Google mapping, where you can
get right on the street, right? You can get on the street, and you can go through and see everything.
I planned an entire chase scene in New York based on looking at the street view.
I do the same thing. I have a chase scene in Compton. I did not go to Compton and race across those building tops.
Yeah, and
I spied on them.
There was one of the books I did with Clive was Typhoon Fury, and a lot of it was set in the Philippines, on an island called Negros Island. Mm-hmm. And I had a person write to me and said, wow, you must have come here and really toured around, because you captured it perfectly. And I was like, I've never been to the Philippines, but I'm glad you thought I was, because that meant I did the satellite view, and I looked at YouTube, and I looked at people's vacation blogs, and you can get pretty much anything you need. Now, I still like to go in person when I can, because there's a lot of serendipity involved where you see something and go, oh, I would never have known that if I hadn't been here, and I've got to use that in a book.
Yeah, or the scent or the feel of the air, and also the vibe of the place. The Ninja Daughter was the first book published, but it wasn't the first book written. And so I've written, now quite a few that have either been completed or in progress. One of them was set in Bali, and I did an enormous amount of research for that one. And then I finally went to Bali, and it was really fun because as we were, our guide was, driving us through the thing. It's like I recognized places like, oh my God, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've driven past this. I've seen that. And then I was talking about this and that and the other thing. And one of the guides, because we had a few, turned to me and says, you know more about my country than I do.
Yeah.
You know more about my history than I know. And I'm like, well, I haven't read a little bit about it, but it does make a difference, and it does help to be someplace in person. So I like to do, a little of both, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, like you, there's certain places that I write about that I don't need to visit in person. It's too dangerous or too awful to get there. And so, we write fiction, so we make it up.
Yeah, we write fiction, and we write a lot of dangerous, gritty, desperate stuff sometimes. So like this book, especially The Ninja's Blade, it's got some real hard issues and themes and grit. And, so it's an interesting thing, diving into that darkness, but still, how can I say, keeping it fun, and kind of lightening it with, humor and, these things so that, ultimately it's entertaining, so you can dive into these questions of racial issues, and you can dive into these, very hard places with these poor teenagers and things. And then you've got this, adorable, meddlesome grandparents coming in from Hong Kong to make her mother's life, a living misery. And, that's always fun.
And do you find when you're writing those scenes, the gritty scenes about the, child trafficking, does that change your mood for that day when you're like writing that chapter?
It changes my mood when I'm writing it. So that's what I meant about the whole method writing thing. It's kind of like the method acting thing. So if I'm going to step into that character, I'm all in. There have been times where I just ugly cry while I'm writing, especially if it's dialogue and I'm speaking the dialogue. And if it's just like one of those heart-wrenching exchanges, I'm just dying. But then as soon as it's done, there's this kind of cathartic relief, and I fix myself a cup of tea and I'm good. It's like stepping out of the character.
Are you still acting?
No.
No?
No,
Why not?
Not unless somebody gives me a call. I thought I had retired after The Love Boat. And then, a friend said, come do a few episodes on our cable series. And I went, yeah, okay. And then another friend said, hey, we need somebody to do the motion capture for the lead in Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. We want to, if you're interested, we want to fly you to Honolulu for the interview. And I'm like, okay, why not? So that ended up being a super fun gig. So every now and again, I'll just like get these calls or people like, you want to do this? Here's a funny one. This happened. I thought I was done getting these calls, right? And then I was a special guest speaker for the Southern California Writers Conference. And after my banquet speech, this fellow came up and he was directing a zombie movie. It's called Cholo of Zombies. And he wanted me to play a cameo. I did it. It was such a kick. I went dressed up in a black gi, black belt, the whole thing. I carried the Ninja Daughter because I was actually supposed to be me. I was supposed to be the author of the Ninja Daughter. And yet I was also the mother of this character. And she had just gotten in a fight with zombies and she was in the hospital. And basically I was like, you need to read my book, because, you would have done better in your fight, that kind of a thing. And, I mean, what a hoot, right? I was just like, oh, I've got to do this just for no other reason than
Yeah.
it's a Cholo zombie movie.
Well, and if you're good at motion capture, I mean, that's like half of Hollywood now. You could be in video games or Avatar or, you know, Planet of the Apes. I mean, there's all kinds of motion capture stuff if you like that.
Well, you know what's interesting is Final Fantasy, we were the trailblazers. We were the very first ones to ever use motion capture for performance in a film. And I think something like 94, 98% of that film was captured. We didn't have the technology to do the face yet. They were still experimenting. That's how early we were. It was before Polar Express, before Planet of the Apes, before all of that stuff. And at that time, I mean, I loved this gig. I really, really enjoyed it. I played two characters, the lead and the sub lead, which was really cool because I had to give them both completely different physical, performances, which was super fun. And at that time, I thought, like, just like what you were saying, oh, this is going to be a great career. And then, some things happened and politics happened and yeah, opening night, we watched the credits roll and all of the motion capture actors were listed as staff. And we all looked at each other and went, excuse me? But it was okay because Screen Actors Guild came back and smacked them on the butt and made them pay us double and stuff, but they couldn't change the credits. But at that time, that soured me a little bit. But for a little moment there, I was thinking, wow, I'm right at the beginning of what could be a huge career in this. But we're also right about that time, I had my kids. And I was doing the screenwriting and I wrote a novel based on one of my screenplays because everybody said, oh, you should be writing novels. And I loved it and it was great. And I finished it and I started to submit it. And I thought, I don't know what it is, but there is such a thing as the business of writing. And I'm not ready to commit to it. So at that time, all I wanted to focus on were raising my sons and this new obsession with martial arts. So, motion capture, bye-bye, and writing went on hold.
Yeah. Well,
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, acting is hard now anyway, just because of the lockdowns. So it'll probably be a while before I'm back on stage, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's true. But I think all of these things that we do in our life, all of the careers that so many writers have had on their way to becoming a writer, and certainly careers in performing arts, it all helps, right? It all just adds depth and layers.
Yeah. Well, we're probably going to get some questions from viewers soon, but I wanted to ask you I mean, you've been doing this long enough that I think you probably have some good advice for people who want to break into this. I'm sure we have viewers who are aspiring writers themselves. So what are some one or two pieces of advice you would give to somebody who's trying to break into the business?
Community. Get involved with community. This is the way you and I met through International Thriller Writers. And when you say I've been at this long enough, I mean, we're talking 9 years of joining associations, attending conferences, building relationships, supporting other authors, being there for them too, right? And getting information and being mentored and being able to pass that along. There's a huge community. We create on our own, but we don't sell books on our own. We really do depend on the community to help us, through our book launches and booksellers and everybody. So one of the things that I would tell an aspiring writer is get involved. Join whatever associations you are able to join at this point. Sometimes you can join as, associate member instead of an active member, whatever it is. Anything that applies to you, get involved, go to conferences, build relationships.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, most of the good things that have happened in my career have been because of people I've met at conferences, other authors, agents, editors, booksellers. And so it's the best way to get acquainted with the industry, know what the trends are. I mean, sitting at the bar and talking to other authors about, what they're going through with their publishers, what it's like to try to find an agent. I mean, all of that stuff. You get so much more information in the 3 days of a conference than you would Googling for 6 months.
It's really true. By the time I got the 2-book deal, I had 2 books in submission, possible sequels to both of those, completely outlined and partially written, and a 5th book begun, and about 5 different short stories published in various, anthologies and whatever. And I had already gained so much understanding of the business and promotion just from talking and learning and connecting, right, with everybody that we met, that by the time I was a debut author, in a lot of ways, I felt like I had a lot more knowledge and a head start than your average debut author, because I had kind of been around. So that's that's the other thing that I would mention. Don't worry about how long it takes, just keep focus on the process. Let the results be the icing on the cake, because everything you're going through, you'll enjoy what you're doing and the stage that you're going so much more. And all of that time, no matter how long it takes, or whatever frustrations, it will pay off, later. Don't worry about that. Just
work on improving your craft, I would say, because there's so much that you can't control in this business, that the one thing you can control is getting better at being a storyteller. And so that's what I would tell people to focus on.
Great advice.
Yeah. John, did you have some questions?
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, one of the great things too about kind of being in the community for a while before you get something published, by the time you get that news, you get that first book deal, you get that published, you have the entire community who's so excited to support you. And everybody's like, yay, your moment is finally here, and they want to help build you up. And it's a wonderful thing. We get to see it all the time. So Tori, you mentioned, joining different groups and different organizations. I know you are a member of the Crime Writers of Color. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that group?
Oh, I love this group. Oh my gosh. It was founded by Walter Mosley and Kelly Garrett and Gigi Pandian. And it's an incredibly supportive, wonderful organization. And we're a group, and we have a forum, and we get to talk with each other and support each other and encourage each other. We have a website, and it's really wonderful. And it's for crime writers and of color, any color, and that's the other thing that's really great. You have all of these authors from different ethnicities. So it's been incredibly a big joy in my life.
We're really excited. Next Tuesday, we're going to be doing a joint event with Rachel Halsell Hall to celebrate her new release. She's going to be in conversation with Kelly Garrett, and Chris Zagorski from Bolo Books is going to be emceeing the whole thing for us. So that's going to be next Tuesday. We're really excited for that. So Tori, do you think that people can jump in with the Ninja's Blade, or do you recommend they go back and they read the first book first?
You can totally jump in. I've had a lot of reviewers, bloggers who have only read The Ninja's Blade. And then I was very gratified. After they were done, they immediately went out and bought The Ninja Daughter. And that was my intention, that you hit the ground running in The Ninja's Blade. I mean, there's action from scene 1. Yeah. And you get a sense of you get a sense of everything that you need to know. And it's as though you're dropped right in to her family and her community, and you can just hit the ground running and enjoy the book.
So this is for both of you. Donna asks, how do you know when there's too much information given about a very cool place? She says she always finds the details fascinating, but she's afraid other writers might die of boredom. So how do you balance that?
Go for it, Boyd.
I think about, for me, it's what is necessary to give the feeling of the atmosphere of the place you're in, and also describing enough of it so that the action later that takes place there, you don't have to spend time breaking up the action to describe what they're seeing, what they're moving through. It's much harder when you're describing a totally new location. I had a book called The Vault where I described the tomb of King Midas, and it was this chamber that had some very specific things that related to the action later. And so I spent a lot of time making it clear how the chamber is laid out, because in later chapters, when there was fast-paced action, I didn't want it to slow down or have people confused. But I tend to minimize the description I put in my books to what is necessary for the plot and what is necessary for the atmosphere.
Yeah, very similar here. I'm a big fan of economically expressive prose. How's that? So I spend a lot of time crafting those sentences because I want to choose my words so that I can give you a visceral sense of it with as few words or few sentences as possible. And I found that just choosing the right word can make up for 3 other sentences. And so I do spend a lot of time with that. One of the most difficult scenes that I ever wrote was in The Ninja Daughter, when I described Lily's apartment, which is huge. You really need to understand, Lily's apartment and the way it's set up is so much of her, because you're entering in and you have her bedroom, and you have these altars, and you have this ancient screen, and it has, qualities of this heritage and this heritage, and there's a dojo right in the middle of the whole thing, and there's, all this, and this kamidana with the Shinto shrine. There's all these things going on. And so, yeah, one of the things that I found is timing is important, right? I don't want to be describing things any sooner than the reader really needs to have them. I might want to describe things, as Boyd mentioned, in advance, but then some of those details need to come as things are happening. And it's easier for the reader to kind of get a sense of place if there's context for the things that they're running into. But definitely, if you're getting bored reading the description, everybody else is, guaranteed.
Don't be afraid to throw it out.
Yeah, beta readers are great for this.
Exactly.
So Tori, do you think that your screenwriting background has kind of helped you hone that ability to be able to kind of get those nuggets in as quick and as concisely as possible?
Absolutely. When I was writing screenplays, it was all about getting in at the last moment and getting out as soon as possible. So, I don't want to waste time in those things. So I do like to keep things moving. The other thing that I really drew from the screenwriting is I write in 4 acts, with the second and third being the big middle, so that each of the acts has a beginning, an exciting, twisty middle, and a climax of their own. So that also keeps the pacing. And I still do kind of like that, 3x5 cards in my mind, only now I use Scrivener, where I can see and keep track of, oh, maybe it's been too long since I've seen this character or this plot, or I've had too much action, or I haven't had enough action, so that I can keep that balance, so that readers never feel like they lost a character or they lost a thread, or they're being, overwhelmed with too much of one thing and not another.
Yeah, and I do that as well. And one thing that I think of is that each of my chapters is kind of like a short story with a beginning, middle, and end. And usually there's a cliffhanger at the end of the story. But that's kind of the way I think about a chapter. So my books are really 70 short stories in a row.
Yeah. And I think because we both write fast-paced, action-driven stories, those chapters tend to be shorter. Whereas if you're, diving into literary fiction or historical fiction, you might really, sink into very long chapters. But I think in ours, it helps to have them short, making you want to get to that next chapter, get to that next page.
Yeah, mine are usually 5 or 6 pages long.
For both of you, who do you read? Do you guys read in the genre when you're writing? Do you try to read outside the genre? Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh my goodness. I have always read everything. I continue to always read everything. I like to mix it up. I'll read action adventure. I'll dive into historical fiction. I'll right there into horror or sci-fi. I'll be there. With Attica Locke and S.A. Crosby and Blacktop Wasteland, and then I'll just be tripping on J.T. Ellison and Hank Felipe Ryan. So it's an interesting thing. I fell into writing crime fiction. I didn't realize I was writing crime fiction until I got the book deal, and it was a crime fiction imprint. And I went, aha, apparently I'm writing crime fiction, but for this series anyway. And so when I found that out, and of course, when I joined the Crime Writers of Color group, then I really wanted to expand, my awareness. And so I started reading a lot of that. But I like to mix it up with just everything.
And one of the great things about going to conferences is I've become friends with many, many mystery and thriller authors. And so I read, for pleasure, I read a lot of the books of my friends. But the people who influenced me when I was younger were people like Clive Cussler, who I ended up getting to work with, Stephen King, Dean Koontz. I really learned a lot about, great storytelling from them. And then I also read a lot of things that are outside of my genre. I read science fiction. I read, I read other types of books. I read a lot of nonfiction. Again, because I'm just interested in that kind of stuff. And that ends up giving me ideas for stories. I'm working on a book now that's kind of a historical adventure. So I've been reading a lot about history lately. So yeah, I'm just all over the place.
Yeah, when I was writing The Ninja's Blade, there are so many cultural characters in it. And one of the things that I wanted to do to seep myself into those cultures was read and watch and listen to the kinds of things that they would enjoy. And so that's fun too. That really kind of, opens things up. And I tend to do that with any character, anything that I'm writing. I like to kind of dive into their world and see what I find.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. Before I head out, I wanted to reiterate, we've been chatting with Tori Eldridge, whose new book, The Ninja's Blade, has just come out. If you order for Murder by the Book, we've got some great signed book plates to go with it. We've also been chatting with Boyd Morrison. Boyd is actually going to be back with us in November on the 18th. He's going to be chatting with Mark Cameron. He has The Marauder coming out, which is a new book in the Cussler world, and Mark Cameron will have a new book in the Tom Clancy world. So we'll be chatting with them about that. So that's November 18th. You can pre-order copies of that at murderbooks.com. Wanted to mention we are now open for appointments on Fridays and Saturdays. You can book those through the store website, and we're still doing curbside pickups for Mondays through Saturdays. So you can visit us at murderbooks.com. You can give us a call. Now you can come visit us at the store. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. This was really great. Tori, I'm so glad we were actually, I didn't mention this. We got to meet at BoucherCon last year when the book had just come out. The first book had just come out. So we're so glad that we were actually able to do something with you even virtually this time for this one.
Oh, I'm so grateful to you. And that was such an exciting thing when I couldn't believe all the books sold out the first day. It was just like, wow, what happened?
And I was there, I don't know if you remember, I was there when you unboxed your first advanced copy for the Ninja Daughter. It was
oh my gosh, I flipped out. I mean, yeah, I really did. It was right in the middle of Pitch Fest.
You should be, but yeah, I was there standing with you when you got the box.
Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you both so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Have a good weekend, and hopefully we will get to do this all in person sooner rather than later.
Yes, thank you.
Take care.
Mahalo.